What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. For some reason, Jason's tasked me with doing the open today. I have no clue why, but, I guess he's tired of doing them all the time. So I'm doing the open. So welcome to the Real Estate Reserve podcast, the number one, what do we say? The number one podcast in the whole universe. Jason likes to say the world.
How about the number one real estate investing podcast?
The number one real estate investing podcast in the universe. And that's what we're doing. So welcome.
Hey, you are a co-host, so you can do.
I can do
the opens. You can do the intros. Sometimes it's not a one-man band. Hey,
I've been doing the questions and interviewing the people, and I did so bad. I didn't even introduce ourselves. My name's Ian from Equity Warehouse. It's my co-host Jason from Hard Money Bankers, and we are in studio again because we love the energy. It's a way better feel in here because we get to really dive deep and drill down on points, and we really like doing them live. So.
Yeah, and also, we have a guest that we're going to introduce you to in a second. Bringing in guests inside the studio, it's just better. You can kind of really relate, ask good questions, kind of do it that way. Listen, if we're interviewing somebody, from another part of the country and they got to do it remote through Zoom.
No, we can't afford the jet yet. One day we'll afford the jet. We just fly them in.
And then we fly.
Yeah.
We fly.
They fly to them, or we fly them in.
Yeah.
Like
I guess we'll figure out.
Nelk Boys one day. I guess.
We'll figure out how that goes. So if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. I promise you're gonna have a lot of fun here with us on the podcast. If you're a return viewer, either on YouTube, Facebook, or if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or any other platform, welcome back. We're making sure we can bring kind of the best guests and provide the best knowledge. So why don't we introduce our guest and get moving?
Yeah. So we had the opportunity, as most of you guys know who follow our podcast, we've been working on the Gaslight Square project. We initially went into the project thinking, yeah, we got this all figured out, and we'll put the whole deal together and we'll wing it. And then very quickly we realized, shit, we should probably have some sophisticated help. And that's when I was introduced to Kuo Pao from PI.KL. So Kuo Pao, if you want to introduce yourself, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. My name is Kuo Pao. I'm a co-owner of PI.KL Studio, and with my partner Pavlina Ilieva. And we're architects, design, build, development since 2010 in Baltimore.
So can we get the official debate out? Ryan, if you're watching, is it PI.KL or is it Pickle? What should we officially call it? Because we don't want to offend anyone. So.
Well, I think I'm not going to give you the best answer, but you can do both. So you can do Pickle, you can do PI.KL. I'm sure there's other words that you can't say on this podcast that you can call it. So whatever you want.
Well, this is the one time I'll be clean on this podcast, so we will not use any bad words, but PI.KL or Pickle. You guys are based out of Baltimore, Maryland?
That's correct. Our office is in Baltimore, Maryland. We're out in just in Fells Point, actually. That's where our office is right now, and we've been out there since 2010. And we're actually purchasing a new property that will eventually shift our operation, our office there soon. Probably, hopefully, in the next year or so. But we'll still be in the Fells Point.
Yeah, that actually we wound up when we left your office that one day after the presentation. We wound up walking by it when we were going to get lunch over at the market, and it's a really cool site. It's an old library, or what was it?
It's the old Nook. It's one of the old Nook Pratt libraries. It was built in 1922, and we're acquiring that through an RFP with the city. And we're looking to not only put our office into that site, but we're looking to program that site in many different ways. And I think, kind of a lot of the same spirit that you're doing at Gaslight, but much smaller scale. We're looking to really program that space and really have the idea of developing multiple opportunities for a community lease and sort of, other types of revenue generation through that site. But really our goal is to really activate that site.
So are you mostly doing your own development work or client work?
I would say, 90-95% is still client work. We do development work, but I think it's really small scale. I'm definitely not to the level you guys are doing. I think we started off one house at a time.
Sure.
We bought a flip house, and we started kind of testing that out. And then we bought a lot and we built a new house. And now, so this will be our first property that we're looking to buy and hold, not putting it back to market.
Nice.
So yeah. So we're small time community micro developer kind of thing that we sort of take one or two projects at a time.
Is that what you would like to kind of focus on in the future? Like, like you have the client work as like your core business, but then as you grow, like, do you enjoy that side of it?
We definitely enjoy that side of it because it helps us to become a better designer. Like for us to sit in the same shoes as you guys, like know what the developer is looking for, knowing how a performer works and how the funding stream and how the sourcing goes and the timing of that. I mean, it makes us understand you guys more as a client. So I think for us, just like construction, when we do design build, that makes us better architects, so we can understand, hey, how does that thing go together?
Yeah.
And we know the understanding of the timing of that all.
Yeah, timing, maximizing space. Did that actually really work? Just because it works on paper, it doesn't necessarily work in the field. And then we're like, contractor saying one thing, architect says another. All right, let this fight happen.
Yeah.
All right, we just need to figure it out, right? Because there's a lot of times when, actually, it's a really good question, is like, when you guys are looking stuff on paper, how hard is it to identify some of those situations when it's like, man, I don't think this is really going to work, but I'm going to place it in anyway? Like, do you find that happening a lot, or is with like technology, things have gotten better where there's not as many mishaps nowadays of like design work?
I don't think there's a perfect science. I think like you were mentioning it earlier off camera, we were talking about when you start any kind of project, whether it's a small development, large development, whatever, you just want to bring a core team together that's going to be able to kind of try to assess all the different issues that could be coming around, the project as much as possible and anticipate as much as possible. So again, I don't think there's a perfect science, but I think the more that you can bring all those team players at the beginning of the project, even at the concept design level or even at acquisition, you're trying to figure this out feasibility wise, due diligence, like that's a good time to bring everyone together and go, let's start this project together and let's try to work this out.
I would say if we could do Gaslight again day one, I probably would have invested some time, energy, and money with you then to say, hey, this is what we have no clue what we're thinking. What do you think? Right? And we were sitting here, Jason's like, well, we're going to talk to an architect about. I'm like, I don't know, but I can tell you it's really freaking important because like we're struggling. I won't say we're struggling with the project. It just took a little bit longer to get where we want because us as developers, we're like, yeah, man, it's really simple. That's an event space. Just look at it. It's a big, ugly shell, but most people can't conceptualize that. Like when people are, I guess, why do people, or you covered when, but like, why should people get architects involved early on to help a project move along? Residential, commercial, it could be anything. What does that look like?
I think I think it's very important to bring someone. I mean, an architect early on in the stage because I think the client or the developer or owners that acquire land, acquire a building, should already have a vision or starting to have a vision for what that thing's going to be.
Yeah.
You're bringing in expertise to try to say, hey, what can you not do? I mean, that's the one thing you just want to make sure you figure out as soon as possible. It's like, what can I not do? And
do you think, and I don't know, maybe Ian knows this too, like, would you bring that in earlier on? Like when I say earlier on, like before you took ownership?
I would.
Gaslight?
I probably, during due diligence, I probably would at least said, hey, Kuo Pao, can you just walk this site with me and like I'll pay you for your time and let's just talk about super high level stuff. Am I crazy? Right? Like I think that probably would have paid off well. I don't even know if you do that, but I would have hopefully convinced you to do that with me and say, just give me some sort of loose conceptual on a paper because, and I'll turn it over to you in a second, but Jason's a part capital investor in Gaslight. He understands the project, but he also understands the project more from a number basis. Sure. I understand the project from like a number basis and what it should look like, and you understand it from what it should look like. So I think that's why I didn't mean to steal the show on that one, but yeah, I 100% would have gotten involved earlier.
And I think on a project that's a big enough budget, you can absorb that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think on any kind of acquisition deal, right? It's a pretty streamlined process, right? As soon as you get interested in some place or property or land or whatever, you're going to have a 90-day, 90,
Right.
however many day due diligence.
Yeah.
That due diligence period, you want to do everything you want. You should be doing, right? Your environmental, maybe if you're going to do some soils report, you're going to do some structural analysis of the building. I mean, all those things happen. I think you should have an architect there too. Just like, hey, if you're already expecting that I want to do X amount of square feet of this, and I want to do this and do, you need to study that then. That before you make the acquisition, right? I mean, you want to make sure you're not buying something and realizing I can't do that.
Yeah, transparently, for us, I got so inundated with the deal as a whole because it had a small environmental issue. It had an owner that wasn't like, hey, here's the doors, come in, let me show you around. Like, that was an issue. Raising the capital, putting the deal together is like, yeah, we'll figure it out, because we've done so many residential houses up to that point where, like, it's just one big house.
Right.
It's not. Right? Like, there's so many, like,
Sure.
You're laughing, but that's what you got to remember. Like, that's what we think. We're like, all right, man, we could step in here and do this. We have enough construction background. We can figure this out and get through it and band-aid it. But then as you start showing tenants, they're like, you're crazy. I'm like, you're right. We are crazy. And then you start hearing that enough times. You're like, shit, I need to put something on paper.
I think back to your question about the cost, like, if the cost has that kind of overhead start, we that's the thing I think we're trying to avoid is that I mean, I think in the beginning, it's a little cost to bring us on board to do a due diligence study period with you guys as part of the other stuff that you're doing anyways, because we're trying to avoid the bigger costs later down the road to have to deal with hard costs and soft costs. That's something that you didn't expect.
Yep.
But I think to your point, when you were saying, hey, I'm already looking at this. I already have these visions of this, and I know what we can do, and I know we got to deal with that.
Yeah.
I think what we would ever do would come in and just fill in any other gaps that we might see. So
right.
We're already following the lead. Like we're like, yeah, we're feeling you on that. We see what you're trying to do. Here's a couple of other ideas, or maybe don't forget about this. You got to make sure. Those are the things that you want to just. You want to do that before you start, you sign the contract. Right?
Yep. Yeah, no, it's noted, checked off. Next project like that, definitely have a conversation early on.
Wait, real quick. So your challenge right now is everyone comes in and sees this big, in their mind, ugly, vacant space.
Yep.
And you want to have a pretty staged property digitally to show them.
Digitally staged is a good way to say it, but I was going to say, look at your office now. I know your office didn't look like this always. Like, could you ever conceptualize the way this looked like without a floor plan?
And this is an easy one compared to what that building is.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay,
right.
So that's what you're stating.
Yeah,
that
and
makes sense.
It's not a clean white box like this would have been, right? Like, this is a pretty straightforward box. Right. Hey, man, I want an office here. Yeah, no problem. We're talking about a 10,000 or 80,000 square foot site that the roofs are falling in, and you're trying to say, hey, man, I got this. Don't worry. Trying to sell it to the tenant, right?
Well, I think it's that what's your audience for what you're hiring the architect to do, right? So if you're hiring them to do a feasibility study to see what is wrong with the building, what we need to watch out for. Let's study that. What can the building do code wise and different types of tenants and programming. That's what we would do. The other things would, if you're trying to provide some kind of information to sell the idea to the lender, sell the idea to the bank, because bank needs to know, are you going to be able to put value into this? What you show me what you're trying to do, or you're trying to sell this to the next tenant. Like if you're trying to say, hey, bank or to lender, I'm going to be able to hold 2 or 3 tenants here. I need to lock in a tenant. So how do you lock in a tenant? How do you entice a tenant to see the vision that you have?
Yep.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and we'll cover some of that here in a minute. So, I mean, obviously, once you guys see Kuo Pao's plan, I mean, you guys got a pretty badass team that came up with this. How many, I don't know, I guess I don't know all the proper terminology, designers, or what do you guys call them in your office? Like, how many people work for you? Like, what's your team look like on that side?
So our studio, we have a small studio. We have it's 6 of us, including the principals and co-owners. We have 3 or 4 offsite that do other things like marketing and our construction, sort of head of construction and stuff like that. So, but our studio is purposely small in the sense that we wanted to create a very talented, focused core team that will be able to engage each other's projects as needed when projects become, wanting to have the need to have a bigger team at times, but otherwise. We usually have a principal, managing principal, design principal, and a project design lead for each project.
Nice. How does I mean, I feel like to be an architect, it's either math and science or the arts, right? Like, what appealed to you about being an architect, or your wife, I guess?
I
Like,
see.
how did you end up in that field? Like,
I think, when I've been asked that a lot. I think when I was a kid, I liked to make things. I think we didn't come with a lot of, you know, uh, toys and all that kind of stuff. I remember I was a little kid. I'd make stuff. I'd just make
Right.
toys. I'd make, things. So I always kind of like always as a little kid making stuff. And then I think later on I loved drawing, so I was just drawing a lot. So when I got to college, I was trying to figure out what I was trying to do, and
right.
I think I went into the art. But my parents are actually, my father was an engineer, and my sister was an engineer. So I kind of went that route, and it didn't quite, just a little bit too on the
Too
engineering,
technical.
too
Yeah.
technical. And I had this art kind of like, desire. So I just kind of put it together, and, there's an architecture degree, a plan and a path. And I was like, oh, I'll try that. And then, never turned back.
Interesting. And then have you always done, I know you mentioned earlier, you'll do residential stuff, you'll do commercial stuff, kind of a mix. Like, did you originally start with one or the other, or did you just kind of start with both?
I think when I worked for other companies, we were doing a lot of commercial retail type work. In the next company I worked for, we were doing a lot of healthcare. And then the design build, the last firm I worked at before when we started our company, it was a lot of high-end residential custom kind of work, and a lot of work that is in the West Coast and in Mexico. So coming back, we kind of put all that together. So we know what those big program type projects are and how you do those, but we really like to get our hands dirty, and really wanted to kind of push the design build stuff. So we started doing a lot of design build.
And I think in that type of business, like, you do gotta have to work for somebody else first. I think there's some, a lot of the real estate investors that we know or we work with and stuff like that. Some of the higher end developer stuff typically cut their teeth elsewhere and they learn on someone else's dime. But a lot of like the one-off fix and flippers and real estate investors, rental property owners, like, there's not really anywhere else to go to work for somebody at that
Right.
size. Not to say that doesn't exist, but a lot of them are like, hey, there's enough mentorship, masterminds, coaching programs, consulting, partnerships that you can do. But I think in your line of work, like, you almost have to.
You don't think there's an architect's mastermind out there?
There's a mastermind for architect,
for everything,
business owners. But like, it's not like, hey, I graduate high school or graduate college and like, hey, Ian, I'm ready. Let's go. Put me to work. So is your stuff just the design, or are you doing the design and the build?
So I would say, like I said, 90% of our work is
just design,
architecture work. So it's design from start to
But so on the client work, it's just the design work on the client work. Okay.
And then when we do our own developments, it's usually a design build kind of. Because we're also licensed general contractors and home builders and home improvement builders.
So
we actually got licensed in that before.
Oh, really?
In architecture.
There you go. So most of your work is local to Baltimore, or is it nationwide, or like, what do you prefer?
So we started out most of our work being local to Baltimore City, and then it kind of grew a little bit, and we started doing a little bit of work in College Park. We have a few projects there, and then we got engaged with a few projects in Wilmington, Delaware, and then now I think we're opening up some stuff even out towards Michigan and Massachusetts. So, but I predominantly, though, most of our work is in the Baltimore.
Can I mention some of your notables in Baltimore? Like, you did Sandtown Millworks. You designed the R house.
We designed our house.
I mean, I remember that thing being that old ugly ass car dealership or
Anderson body shop.
Body shop. That's what it was.
Yeah.
We used to drive past all the time in the fire edge. I'm like, man, look at that dump hole. And then one day I was like, holy shit. Okay. Wow. Who had the idea for that? Now, in a situation like that, like, I know our situation in Gaslight is like, hey man, I'm thinking these things. And then you enhanced what I was thinking. Something like the R house, or anything. Are people more like, hey, Kuo Pao, do your thing? Or is it a lot of times the owner of the property is like, this is what I'm thinking? Like, how do you even get to some of these designs?
When a client work, I would say it's always the clients coming with, some kind of vision, some kind of, thought and thought process. And for our house, the developer was very hands-on, and then they knew generally what they wanted to do, a part of the entire sort of development of that area. but with the food hall was probably a new thing that they had not done before. So,
Right.
I think it was more of definitely a collaborative effort. It wasn't just like, hey, I don't know what to do here, you guys do it. It was really collaborative. We worked with the community a lot. We worked with a lot of user groups. They had a large team that had expertise as well, some in the food service kind of space. So I think working together, we did it as a team, and we figured it out as a team.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you guys check out their Instagram, only because I can't tell you guys enough. For those of you that are listening, they got some ridiculous ideas and work that's been drawn and actually completed. Right, like that's the thing. Some people can draw some badass shit, but then actually to put it in the street is equally as hard, because it's like, yeah, it looks great on paper, but this doesn't mean this is real life stuff.
Sure.
What? Now, I know you do a lot of work in Baltimore, DC, so there's probably a lot of like adaptive reuse type stuff. How do you view, well, let's start with this. Do you prefer doing ground up type stuff, or do you like the adaptive reuse building type product better to work on?
It's hard. I think they're both great. Obviously working out of the ground, there's a lot of comfort there, because you're not having to deal with some of the things that you would find with an old building that you kind of sometimes have to push and pull with. And if you're coming out of the ground, after you get out of the ground,
everything's square.
There's not too many mysteries, right? After that, so there's definitely a comfort level there. But I think adaptive reuse, when we have to deal with existing structures in Baltimore, I think that's one of our favorite things. Obviously, because we're dealing with this old fabric and we're having to find new life into them. So that is a great challenge to us. It's never a straightforward process. It's a lot of push and pull, but we love seeing these things kind of find a new life. I think that's the epitome of some of these sort of
and the artsy side,
mid-Atlantic,
the artsy sides of you can come out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but I mean, again, it always challenges us. I mean, like you said, it's never a perfect science. Every building is different. Every building reacts differently, and so and you're trying to stick a program in there that potentially that building's never seen. You're trying to do something structurally to that thing that the building's never been able to do before. So you're challenging that building. You're challenging this thing, and you have to work at it. You have to, and I think a lot of the things that we like to do is try to celebrate what you have. Like, you celebrate the structure you have. So that's why, when we're talking at Gaslight, like the buildings that you have that are beautiful. There's nothing. It's almost like you want to try to do as little as possible to retain the beauty that's there. And I think that's what we try to do for all of our adaptive views.
Yeah, when I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm just thinking, it's like, you don't really think of the building, especially older buildings. Maybe you do more there, but it's like, it is a living, breathing thing that you're trying to combat, right? Like, that's interesting.
Should we bring that?
Yeah,
that up?
Yeah,
I know we got some slides here of it.
So just real quick, guys. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off, Jason. So Kuo Pao and team, we had contracted them to come up with, I guess, more of like would you call this a concept design for us on Gaslight, of like, hey, Kuo Pao, like, I've had event spaces and breweries come through, and we would love for this thing to live and breathe on its own as like a mixed use type site. So his team put this together. And I guess we can kind of go through it, and just, I'd love to hear, like, on some of the slides of like where'd you get the influences from? Like, where do these thoughts even come from you to be like, hey man, this is what I was thinking here?
Sure. So just to say that the presentation, I think at the time when you guys came to us, it was less about what can be done there. It was more about showing someone what you're gonna do. So your vision was, you already kind of brought that vision to us, and we just sort of fed on it. We just said, yeah, we can see what you're talking about. It's very, very clear, and so let's just show them. So a lot of times these packages are great to go out to a potential tenant or a potential partner or investor or something, to just show them, hey, they may not know what's around that building, but look at the opportunity. So these kinds of maps are really great to have in a presentation, is just to give them a sense of like, wow, there's the site that we're talking about, and look at what's already happening around us. PI.KL is flourishing. The Warner Street Entertainment District is going, it's developing so quickly and so rapidly. So we wanted to just pinpoint things that are happening that an investor or a tenant or a potential lease would look at it going like, okay, I see the potential.
Yeah, and this helps I'll tell you this package in general, but like this first picture here has helped everybody be like, oh shit, 95 is there. Like you're not lying to me, even though it might feel a little bit further than it is. The Orioles Stadium, M&T Bank, right? Like all these things are important to it. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, because like not everybody's from Baltimore, right? So
Exactly.
Need to know. These are just quick images of just like what's there and just giving it a little bit of sense of this. Again, people may not be on the ground and be able to see this project, so we're just kind of giving them a general sense of what's there
to see how it could be cohesive as one.
Yeah. Yep. So this is just more just kind of showing the site.
Wait. Oh yeah, your building's this white building.
So
too, right?
I think you shaded out the white building because that building is basically already developed in our mindset.
Our focus was just to generally look at the area that's a little bit more saturated in color right now. So that was our focus with you guys. We knew that the parking lot and the existing 2-story building was already leased out. So this is our focus.
This is where your mastermind was, right here, right?
Yeah, we held our mastermind upstairs.
That. Okay, cool. Just trying to get a good frame.
Again, just giving a lay of the land for someone that doesn't know and hasn't seen it. So this is just a plan just to show you, kind of generally what's happening in terms of the site, existing photos, existing floor plan. So part of our scope with Ian and Ryan to look at this in this particular presentation was just to predominantly look at building B, like what can building B do.
Yep.
And so before we can see what it could do, we just got to show what it is, So this is just existing drawings.
So the squares on there, just for people who are looking at that, do they represent like a square? Does that represent a certain amount of square footage, or is it really just to show people breaks? The little squares inside the actual box, where your numbers are.
That's just you're talking about the grid line.
Yep.
The grid line is just the structural grid. So we just, that's typically just to give a sense of how big the grid is. Again, a potential tenant may want to come here and say, I want to do X, Y, Z in there. And so it's good to know that, hey, there's columns in that space and that's the dimension of the column. So this is, again, just to provide information.
And you guys, so if like an office tenant wanted to come in here, you could easily drop 6 cubicles in there, or if an event space wants to come in there, hey, I can put 100 people in this one box.
Right, like an office tenant or a user will look at that and without drawing anything, they might be like, oh, 10 by 10 space, I know what I can fit in there. Just kind of.
Makes sense.
Some of these are like some people might look at these images and go like, oh, it's just kind of an old warehouse, but we look at it just like they're just beautiful photos. I think it's showing the potential of what the space can do, but also just how beautiful the space is without touching it. Like this building is amazing, even just in the subtle light and in the texture of the building. So again, just trying to entice people to kind of look. Most people that your audience and your potential tenants and partners are going to be savvy enough to go like, yes, I can see what can happen there.
Yeah, I would say one takeaway I think the number one takeaway I had from you is like, and we knew this, but to hear it from you or from someone else was preserve. Don't go in here and paint. Don't go in here and do this. Preserve what you got, clean it up, and make it look good. And I think even when you put this here, and if you told me that again, I'm like, yeah, dude, like look at those trusses in the upstairs, like just clean them up. Get them so their paint's not chipping off anymore, or the brickwork especially. There's great brick detail in this thing.
Totally. I mean, that's if you're talking about historic preservation, there's other ideas about how that should be, and sometimes it's just showing the traces of the history.
Yep.
So like peeled paint, that layers of different peeled paint that's been like generations of layers on top of each other, and also the degradation sometimes of the wood. If it's kind of beat up, it's got nicks and cracks. It's like, as long as it's not a structural issue, those things are like, those are historic things that happen in that building, so those are things that are really special. People will see special, will see how special it is, particularly because you said, hey, it's important to us, and so we're keeping that.
Howard County Jason over here, he wants his nice clean boxes, and I like messing with him because whenever he comes up to this city, he's like, man, this is scary. I'm like, yeah, but this is what's beautiful about it, right?
Well, I say that, and this is just looking at what it is now,
right?
But we also obviously have to consider what it's going to be. So what it's going to be, there will be those times where you have to find a way to refine it, and it can't be just this all the time, right? So it really depends on what it is, right? So
sure. If you're watching this podcast live via video, you can see that we're going through a screen share presentation, this concept design of Gaslight Square. If you were listening to this via podcast platform, tune into realestatereservepodcast.com if you want to watch us on video so you can see what we're referencing. All right. So keep going.
Keep going. So I think this was kind of just once we kind of, that first part is just really just showing what's there, right? What's existing. And so these are just kind of feeding off of what, Ian and Ryan is kind of telling us, hey, what could be potential areas of new program, and how could we start to strategically kind of program the space? So we're just kind of thinking about, that they had talked about, like, let's do an event space, a coffee space. Maybe there's a co-working idea. Maybe let's look at some of the exterior spaces and really start to reprogram those. So these are just.
So you're thinking about putting a stage right here?
Well, that was
for concerts.
Just real quick, we went to Kuo Pao and said, "Hey, man, like we'd love to have a brew house, maybe a coffee house, event space. Like, what does that look like?" The first time I saw this, I'm like, "Dude, what is he talking about?" But like, and you guys will see here in a few slides of like I like the word activate that you've been using, is like you're activating all this dead space that we're like, fuck it, we'll just put parking there. He's like, nah, man, this is like leasable space that makes this site work together as a whole and ultimately get a higher dollar per foot. If you guys really want to know what I said I need a hipster feel in this place. Like, hook me up. I think is exactly what we were talking about. One of these. But dude, like this is what a city type property. Actually, really any like mixed use type property, you need to find a way to bring all the spaces together in some way, shape, or form, right?
I agree for this whole layout right here.
Yep. So
put a beer garden in there,
and you'll see he's got some badass pictures here in a second. So
this has started getting deeper into the actual building B, just kind of like saying, hey, what are some ideas to try to make this into an event space? So
Jay, just go back real quick. I just want to point it out, like some stuff that we didn't really think about is like how people get in and out of the space. And again, like we were saying, well, why do I need an architect? F it, I can figure it out. Then you're dealing with fire code, how people travel through the property, how do they get in and out past that lawn area? Someone comes in Severance Street. I'm like, damn it, like this is why we paid you to do this, because you don't. I mean, it's crazy to think, oh, just come in the Severance Street door, you'll be fine. And you're like, you don't even think about it, right? Like someone had to spend the time to think about how even to set up your office to get in here, right? So,
and I think also the expectation is not that your development team can't do this. It's that you have other things to do, probably,
right?
So, and we know what it's in your head, or you're telling us what's in your head. We're just helping you to visualize.
Well, you've done more reps. You've done more reps. Like that's your profession, right? Like just like anything else, you've done this hundreds, thousands of times. He's done it once or twice. It's the same thing inside. Right. If you need help inside, whatever, you're developing a property, right. Ian will know better just because out of experience. Like that's all it is.
But what really helped is that you guys have had it for maybe close to a year.
About a year,
we chatted, and so you've lived with it. You've been walking that space forever, and you're always pondering and thinking. So your feedback is only going to help our process.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with like Jay. When we were flipping houses, I'd be like, hey, I want to borrow money on this house. And he's like, nah, dude, I'm not giving you that much money. I'm like, oh shit, red flag, right? Like it's the same thing with you. You're like, hey man, did you think about this? I'm like, oh, you've done enough of these designs that you understand the space and how it should work out, which helped us a lot. Next slide.
So that, two-dimensionally was what we just saw of what the program could look like. And we just kind of elevate that and just show that just it's sometimes easier to see. It's maybe a different way to look at it three-dimensionally and go, oh, what's happening?
No doubt.
So it's helpful.
Yeah, this is cool.
I think in this slide you're showing the second floor space, and so guys, just again, if you're listening to it audio, on the audio it's a little hard to understand, but on the back side we were talking about maybe a coffee house of some sorts, and you were utilizing basically what we thought was dead space on the second floor, and so well, what if you cut open a mezzanine, really showcase the trusses in that building, and see if you get the operator to put a co-working space in there, or have the coffee operator have more space and running. Where do you even get like influences from something like that to highlight something like that, or even think about, hey man, this is a 2-story building, but we can make the first and second floor feel like one unit. Have you done this in the past, or did you see it somewhere that you're like, oh, I want to try this out?
A lot of our stuff is probably, it's either based on experience or based on, different projects that we've done where maybe parts of it we're doing we're doing some of that, and other projects where it's a little bit more sort of autonomous. But then I think we've always been trained, even in college, was to think about that different types of programs, different types of things can come together and actually make a project even better. So pairing a co-working space with a cafe or an event space with a co-working or a brewery kind of type space, those are only going to make synergy,
Yeah.
synergy, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to have opportunity to have cross pollination. So, I mean, these aren't new ideas. These have been in the 70s. Architects were already thinking about, hey, how do we cross program and hybridize program? So we're just continuing that effort and saying this is not a new thing. In fact, we're probably just now in the last 10 years or so really taking advantage of it and really kind of making it challenging what that thing really can be. So I think we've definitely seen projects out there. We always look at case studies and precedents. We always go see projects when we can. I think a lot of things that happen overseas outside of the Americas that are doing it so good and so much better than us, that we learn from that and we bring those ideas home. So I think it's a lot of that.
Is code overseas more strict than U.S. code? Because I always feel like U.S. we're restricted by a lot of stuff.
I think it's definitely. I mean, every country is different, obviously, but and even every state is different. But I definitely it's definitely more stringent here than it is in other countries.
We'll blame the lobbyists. That's a good place. That's a good place to start.
Well, I think a lot of it's probably the majority of it is probably good that it's more stringent.
Probably,
right? I would say, but
we don't have towering infernos like you see sometimes from the Asian countries. It's just a whole high rise on fire. I'm like, what, dude? How does that happen? But then when you start thinking about building code, and I'm like, I don't want to move sprinklers. Well, now I know how you move sprinklers, right? Stuff like that.
Well, we even learned from that too. So even when that happened, our code changed and got more stringent on fire protection and stuff like that. So
that stuff doesn't being stringent on that doesn't bother me.
It bothers the checkbook. I can tell you that
it bothers you short term. But I remember when I had to follow a bunch of stuff, in my house with a hot tub
to do a sunroom,
and do stuff like that. It pissed me off. But then I was like, this is probably smart.
Yeah, you're not going to electrocute yourself in your hot tub.
Yeah, doing it the right way.
Well, even you were talking about,
and that's a little project.
You were talking earlier about structural engineering. That's the one place I go, well, if they're really kind of pushing it and maybe not necessarily over designing it, but really being cautious, and I would say that's the one place I'd be cautious. I would be lenient there and say let's go a little bit further and design a little further and more capacity.
So Ian, what's the next step? This is badass. Let's go.
Keep going. Keep moving along. I mean, it only gets better.
When's it getting?
We're trying to find the right tenant. So hopefully someone's watching today. I think Kuo Pao, what he did here was he basically flipped the spaces around to say, well, what if it was retail off Severn Street first, right?
So I think we went through a few schemes just to kind of just test out what could happen. And so instead of having the event space from Severn, we said, hey, why don't we flip it? Just because maybe we haven't thought about that, but let's see what I can do. And so that be coming off of Severn, we would have coming straight into an entry hall, and then it would be the coffee shop there. So that becomes more of that more focused tenant. And then on the other side of the building, having that be more of the open, leasable sort of or interchangeable event space.
Yeah, and you'll see here you'll start really seeing. And so this is again the second floor, first floor design. You can keep going, and we can get into some of the fields. Keep going a little more. So here, what you did was you said, well, let's move the coffee out, right?
Right. So there was a talk about what if we had a brewery? What if we got, what would that look like? So we said, well, why don't we test that in the planned south kind of side of the building and say let's put the brewery there, make that a double height space, because the tanks really need that volume and that height. So we created the brewery on that side, and on the front side we had more of this idea of a kind of retail hall. And that to your question earlier, we've seen projects that are kind of like this, where they buy this huge large space, and then they create this sort of more a little bit less it's just multi-vendor tenants that are like a mall, but it's a little bit more like a but
it was inside a coffee house, right?
Yeah, it was inside. The one that we saw was inside a coffee house,
and that's in San Diego, inside an airplane hangar, right?
Yeah,
we got to go. I want to check that.
Yeah, they're great, and I thought that was kind of this could be another idea similar to that, because they're doing great over there, and what could that be over here?
And again, I like the idea of you talk about celebrating and preserving is the brewery tanks are so tall. We got 40-foot ceilings or 30-foot ceilings. well, these tanks are so tall. It's like, well, I'm bringing the first floor into the second floor. So when you're on the second floor, you still feel like you're on the first floor.
Right.
I think that's like really, and again, it's stuff like where us as developers, I'm like, yeah, I think a brewery feels cool here, but I don't even know how you make it look cool. And I think if you go to the next slide,
Yeah, you can tell. You see,
see
like,
how you,
now we're actually,
Yep.
if we had something on the second floor, which is like, like spill out space for the brewery, you're looking down into the tank room, and so you kind of like make this like cool viral experience around the process of brewing.
Yep.
That could be a really fun place. I mean, everybody's gonna want to come here and check that out.
Yes, it's a couple photos on Instagram, and people are like, "Oh my god, I gotta go check that place out. The building just looks badass.
Right.
Forget the brewer and everything else, right?
Right.
What are you doing? You just keep clicking buttons, huh? Keep going.
Yeah.
I know you're trying to take it all in, and then go ahead.
And then after we studied building B and said, hey, here's 1 or 2 or 3 options, that gave you guys an idea of like, hey, what can happen there? We looked at the site and said, hey, what can happen around the site, and how does that start to interact with the rest of the building? So how does that interact with building B, D, E, and C once those are programmed too? And so these next few images that you're going to see, this is the site plan, just seeing it from above as a plan view is kind of showing you kind of where those the kind of the first diagram you saw, what we envisioned could be there plan wise, and start to think about that a little bit more with scale, just kind of seeing what that could look like. And then I think most people will understand this the most, where it's like, okay, let's put some real texture there, some people there, and so just to give them a sense of what the spirit of the space wants to feel like, and the vibe and everything.
And it's amazing what mature landscaping does to a site to soften it's almost like it softens the buildings in the right way. Because like I remember when you were walking around, you're like, this is like apocalyptic. I can't even say the damn word. You know what I mean? After a warehouse is like shut down, and now you got this site, and we're going to celebrate it. Like, I think the mature landscaping really like helps that along.
Yeah, that looks badass. So what do you have, software that does this, or your designers? How does that even work? Because this is the actual building.
That's the actual building.
So what, they took a photo of the building and then
we have many ways of doing it.
That's crazy.
This made sense because so these are just collages. So we take real photos of the actual space, and we had our team out there, and then we bring them back. We kind of cut them up. We Photoshop them and kind of just layer,
got it. Yeah, that's awesome.
To it. Other times we'll model the building to a very detailed way, and then we'll render that, and it'll be a 3-dimensional model.
He could be our VA. What do you think?
Yeah, dude, that no, I mean, that's really cool. I mean, I can
felt better to kind of just do it as a
I mean, I can see the benefits of doing this ahead of time. I mean, even if it's pricey, just be like, hey, like I need to wrap my brain around what's going to go on.
Well, I mean, think about this. This is walking in that building B, the big long building, and here it is. It's like, here's a grand entrance. Well, when you walk in there right now, you're like, I don't really see how you could take this deck out and you do this, and this is like boom. And he's like, and you could explain it, but it was like line of sight straight through the building and really celebrate how big, how long, how much stuff could be in this building, along with the height of it. So I think that was smart. And when I tell you what, this slide here was the one that did it for me. I was like, God damn it! All right, like I get it now.
But I mean, it started with you guys. I mean, you said, hey, we want to open up the space. We're like, we're on board. We know we agree, and this is what it could look like. So.
If you go back, that's what we hosted the mastermind here on the right hand side. That's where that elevator is, and that's that courtyard there.
It's awesome.
Again, I think you were trying to say, hey man, like if people are here at a brewery and a coffee house, and there's co-working space and there's an event space, people need place to hang out, and you have it. Do this, right? Is that what we got here?
Yeah, totally. I think developments like this really kind of set up that feel of a campus. It doesn't have to be a school campus.
Yeah.
This is like a retail campus, an event space campus, office, co-working. It's a campus. I mean, it's generally, that's what it should feel like. It should feel like we're a place where it doesn't matter what I'm doing, this thing should be invigorated with people. It should always have people flowing through there and have spaces that are different. So like this image was going to be more of an intimate kind of garden, whereas on the next image that you'll see, that's where the activity wants to be. That's where the kind of
that's the stage.
Yeah, so that's where the stage will be.
Awesome.
That's where the food trucks will be. That's where you're going to be spilling out for the brewery. You're going to have events. You're right down the street from the stadium. So we were talking about like, gosh, you're going to have like game day sort of events here and all that kind of stuff. So it's like it's a no brainer. Like if anything, again, we didn't need to do, you had it. It's there. We just needed to show people.
Conceptualize it. That was
Yeah,
it.
Just needed to show them.
Well,
this is what it is.
so this isn't really on the architectural side. This is more on the business side of this. But like, I'm guessing there's probably, there could be a play, and I'm not saying in this case it is. There's a play to build all this stuff out and then backfill it afterwards. I think that'd be risky and it'd be expensive, because here's the thing: maybe you get a coffee shop, but then like you need kind of everybody kind of to be on board with the concept.
I'll tell you my learning lesson here is, if I engaged Kuo Pao early on and we were mature enough on the project to be like, hey, this is really what I feel here, I probably would have had this design done and then went new market tax credits and probably forced the build and monetize the new market tax credits to pull the cash back in, and then build all this out and then sit around and wait for who I want to wait for the right operator, because then there's not as much of a burden. But that's all hindsight, so we know for next time.
Well, but also you can market and pitch to somebody that could fill the space, and
it's an easier sell.
Right? It's an easier sell. Are you familiar with Common Kitchen in Clarksville?
I'm not.
I just brought it up real quick. I'm just gonna show it to you, and then I don't know how to ping it to the screen. So I'll just put it in the camera.
Okay.
But scroll through that a little bit. It doesn't have all of it, but so Craig Northrop. You guys can't hear me because I'm not on mic.
Yeah. So anyway,
do Google Street Roof View too.
What's the name of the site?
It's like Common Kitchen. That's one of the places. And Common Kitchen is actually a spot where they have one, whatever that co-cooking area is, and then there's like 8 different restaurants that use the shared stuff. That's part of it. Then there's retail. I wouldn't say there's much entertainment as that, but like that's view of it. And it's cool. And I mean, I've been there. Like, it's a nice, clean, safe, kind of eclectic environment that you go check out. I mean, this is in the city. This is obviously way better. There's Gaslight after it's filled out, but that's.
Did you say something in the city was actually better? It's on. Go ahead, I'm listening.
I have an economic interest in this thing.
Oh, okay. All right. There you go. All right. I knew it was stuff.
I think to your point, what you're showing on your phone is that I think in just any kind of retail experience, when you have if it's a retail development, you're going to have to create a destination. People are already doing it very well. There's a lot of retail groups that are doing it very well. Some of the local developers here know that. And this has to be a destination. It's like destination first almost.
Yep.
Because once you create that, everybody will come. The users will come. The tenants will come. And so it's kind of like you want to think about this. Like, how do I make this a place first?
Real life business idea.
And I think to go back to like the business side of things, had I had all this and I did it new market tax credits and I went that route, my belief is that we would have pushed forward and just built the whole project. But then you could also get a higher price per foot, because it's like, here's everything. There's no TI, right?
Yeah.
Like this is it. Like, you're stepping into a space. You just need to set up shop and do your thing. It's going to cost you $1 million to put your brewery in. That's on you. But in the end, your buildings are ready to go. The outside's ready to go. There's no waiting for anything to get done. And then potentially we could get a higher price per foot, or we could wheel and deal a little bit harder on some of the stuff that we had already done.
Well, let me ask you this question, like another business question. So what about if you clean up the side, like this image right here? What if you create this image, create local bands, put a freaking beer garden in there, try to figure out a way to break even for the entertainment side, and then all of a sudden it, started in the spring, let's just say, people start coming, you paint the 2 sides of the building, or you do something so that those sides of the building don't look clunky and there's no.
Don't rush the process. We're working through some stuff. But
so I don't know.
So we need a civil. So after this plan came, then we're like, well, when we see this, we're like, shit, we really need to get our civil squared away, and the water management and stormwater management. And this is what we literally showed them this and said, there's a potential we end up with something like this. How do we navigate? Because there's some water issues here, because there was an old building that is actually in this site that was ripped down at one point and caused the water issue. So we said, hey, if we want to do this, what does that look like? So we're working through that right now. And then and we talked about it, didn't we? Is like just putting mature trees in a pot on the site softens up the whole site.
Yeah.
So just taking some of this, we don't necessarily need to plant the grass and do everything else, but if we just put some nice, large, mature potted plants on the site, it softens the whole place up as a temporary fix until we can execute the rest of the plan.
On a site like this, can you put additional buildings? I mean, that's a complete 180 from what I just said, but like, could you put additional buildings on there? And
I mean, I would
if you
prefer
had-
to Kuo Pao, but I think
Yeah.
the city doesn't have much lot coverage issues, right?
I mean, the site is big enough that you could certainly put more structures there if you needed to, but do you need to? I mean, I think the one thing that we're missing from some of these destination type developments like this is just having a great amount of exterior space to be able to hold these kinds of events. I mean, you have 7 good months here, maybe even 8. You know, like people want to be outside and hanging out, and you know, you have plenty of volume here to put all your square foot of potential food service, you know, like food space kind of things, the event space kinds of things. So just having that kind of outdoor space is really, really,
yeah. And I think with the outdoor space, the right operator's smart enough. He goes and puts he or she puts a tent up, utilizes the outside space in the winter, right? Like the event space we're talking about. It's a wedding. One of them is a wedding venue. He's like, hey, in the courtyard, is it cool if I put up a tent so I could add 200 people outside, so I could get 300 people inside, 200 people outside. You get 500-person event out there. It's wild. And then if you have a brewery there, they're picking up the synergies of the events that are taking place. Everybody got to go to the after party. You know that. So, but yeah, no, I think you really showcase the space on how to make it live and breathe on its own. And I think a lot of the words that you've used between activate and living and breathing, I think not enough people spend the time on this, and you're really utilizing outside space. I mean, on a project like this, like if it was, let's just say we could do residential here and we said, hey, we're going to convert all these to apartments, like on an outside space type thing to bring cohesiveness, like you do something similar like this to this type of property?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're working on actually a number of multifamily projects that we're making sure that we're not just putting up a stick building and putting units in it. We're really thinking about that the building has to be sited well.
Right.
And so everything that goes around it wants to be able to have this opportunity to have the building flourish with a adequate and enhanced sort of exterior space. And so I think all of our projects right now, we're trying to get to the point where we're incorporating that, knowing that that's a necessity. I mean, I think COVID taught us that if you're thinking that a lot of people are going to be continuing this work from home kind of spirit, that you're going to have to develop these more humane buildings and more humane, sort of instances of living and working and here, just entertainment and co-working and so forth. You have to create these spaces where that you will be able to be outside and you will be able to have those opportunities to coexist. You can't just sit there and be in an enclosed box.
Yep.
Right? So.
100%. And I like when you were walking the property, you're like, hey man, do you think about the basement of like augmented reality? I was like, yo dude, you're so over my head, but like that was cool. But then I was like, where are you coming up with this shit? And then like, here's like a prime James Coffee. This is what you're talking about with the hangar and the shop, the retail shops inside of a coffee house.
Yeah. So we before we started PI.KL Studio, we actually lived in San Diego. We were working for an architect there, and hanging out, just seeing what they do out there, and very progressive, sort of city that would create developments like this, and so we met these guys, and the coffee's great, obviously, but they had this really cool idea of inhabiting an old air hangar. And at first, they just had the coffee component, but I think at one point, I believe the owner, I think, is also a metal worker, and decided, hey, I'm going to start to, create these sort of interior spaces that would actually allow other, partners and friends to come in and start selling some of their goods. So it was really cool just to see how he made something that was an old hangar turn into this like really cool development idea.
Yeah, no, when I saw that, I was like, oh shit, this is how it all comes together and it makes sense. And then here, this is like kind of showcasing like some outdoor type space, right?
Yeah, and yeah, the next few slides, starting with these, I mean, all of these were, it's again part of our package where we always say, hey, we're developing an idea and a vision. in partnership with the client. And sometimes, we have these cool collages that we showed earlier, but sometimes it's good to kind of see an actual project that has been built.
I mean,
And so like, hey, there's some instances that could be similar that we learn from these projects that might help to, again, show someone what it could be.
I mean, I think it was at the first walkthrough, or maybe after this, we went back and hung up string lights, even though there's not a lot of people there at night, just to showcase, hey, man, this is what it looks like. And those lights not on make it look cool. Like, it just has that instant feel about it, which is interesting. And then, I think you see it a lot more on the West Coast. Like, I've been to Phoenix, where we've been to restaurants where it's like half indoors, half outdoors. I feel like, and maybe you're right, like people feel like on the East Coast the weather's not right. I don't know why we don't have more indoor outdoor living around here.
Sure. I don't know. I maybe it's a mentality, but I don't know. I'd put on a puffy coat and go outside and sit at a fire pit and have some.
I'm in.
I don't know why you
We
can't
got more
extend,
slides.
I don't know why you can't extend that feeling out there.
Yeah, and I mean, here's Toronto, right? Like, here's like a whole outdoor market, and we know it snows there more than it does here. Which, again, I think this.
And particularly the distillery area in Toronto is actually really great precedent. I mean, like I said, I think there's not, we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel. There are already things that are happening out there that we can learn from and that are successful. And I think, you're just going to have to put your own identity to your version of it, but it's happening. And there's already things out there that you can look at. You can actually go and walk around and go like, wow, this thing's working.
Yeah, and I love that you found real life examples of like sites that look familiar to us. It's like, oh, is this gas? Oh no, it's someone else's. Okay, because this one's in the American Tobacco in Durham, which is a great. The wedding venue that you showcased here reminded us of the B building, and we're working with an event space now about, hey man, did you see these? And as soon as he saw that, he's like, yeah, this whole thing makes sense to me.
And we should go look at them, right? I mean, I think you learn from them. I mean, it reaffirms that the idea is there. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You look at it, this should help to convince someone that maybe can't see it, that might be a future tenant, future partner, future investor, and they go, oh, okay, I get it. I see it now. Like if after the presentation they don't get it, maybe they're not the right partner. But
exactly.
They should be able to get it after that.
100%. We appreciate you walking through this, and like, hopefully this gets the guys that are even just in residential, right? Like, go on. I hate that my wife will kill me when I say this, because she'll be like, this is why I'm on Pinterest all the time. But like, go on Pinterest, right? Like, go on YouTube, go on Instagram, and go look at stuff and be like, all right, how can I implement something like that here, even if it's just a residential house, right? Like,
sure. I mean, we're in a digital era, right? I mean, influences and aspirations can be found anywhere, So I think the best is always just to go out there and check it out, and look at it, walk it, see it, experience it for yourself, because the photos are great, sometimes, and seeing videos online, but when you go out there and you see a project and you're like, oh, I feel it, I see it, I get it. I mean, those, you can't beat that.
Well, I mean, it's a no-brainer on this size scale project, but even if you're a one-off small real estate investor that's flipping a house, like, you still got to put in the time and the attention to do it the right way. And that's in a market like we're in now. The difference between a real estate investor who's going to fail and succeed are the ones that, build to whatever the current homeowner's liking is going to be the right way. And especially when you're in cities that have older buildings, in the suburbs and newer buildings, the style's more congruent to what people want.
Sure.
But older buildings from forever ago can't just put back together based on that style. You gotta change things up based on who your target avatar is that you're selling to.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, even when we were flipping, we would spend all the time combing everything and be like, all right, maybe we should try this. Then you go to try, you're like, God damn it, that was a lot of work. Like, might not have been worth it, but right. Like,
but those are the best ways to learn, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's a bit of trial and error. Like,
if
you didn't fail, you haven't pushed. Right?
100%.
And it's not a failure unless you don't learn. If you didn't.
That's right.
So.
Speaking of which, what are you, a podcast or a book guy?
A bit of both. I think I probably podcast more than I get a chance to sit down and feel like I have the time to get lost in a book. But
what's the go-to? What's the go-to podcast?
Oh, go-to podcast. Oh, I don't remember the name of it, but I think the one I was listening to the most was I think it was like a like they had I can't remember the name, I apologize, but they just had a lot of court stories about these sort of crazy, sort of murder mysteries.
Oh, true crimes.
Yeah, maybe it's like that. Yeah, and they're just so interesting because then it's like you're listening to them, they're talking about like this and this and that, and then at the end, and then they're guilty, not guilty, and you're just like, oh, so I'm kind of like a little bit of a freak on those. I love those things, but. So it's not probably what you expected me to say.
No, I mean, dude, everybody lets
like
go in a different way, right? Like 2 years ago now or something like that, we got lost in Atlas Shrugged, right? Like it's quasi a business book, but we got lost in Atlas Shrugged for 60 something hours. It was such a good dynamic story along with like some political business view type stuff. And it was like, God damn, man, that was like really good. And it felt good not to just listen to a business book, American Kingpin, the guy from Silk Road, the guy that founded Silk Road, that whole thing. Like we listened to that one. That was a good one. Just to, again, sometimes you just got to let go, man. Like it can't be business all the time,
Yeah, no, yeah.
Well, it makes you more creative. It goes a long way. And here's the thing, like a lot of these things kind of come back to business in one way or the other. Like, hey, I like the way that this person marketed this or the way that, help you think about things differently.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like you something, and I like those types of podcasts as well. I can't say I've listened to any of them recently, but like I've been lost in some of those crime podcasts, especially because some of them are so well done.
Yeah.
They're so well done. And podcasts these days, they not that they have budgets of a movie, but like they put real time and real energy, and they're experts that are working on them, and they're really well done.
Sure.
100%.
So I agree with that.
Where's the best place people can find you if they want to engage you or just see some of your work? Where's the best place everyone can find you?
Yeah, so our website, it's PI.KL Studio .com, and you can catch us on Instagram. Instagram is probably the best place to find us, just because it keeps up to date of kind of what we're doing culture wise and project wise, and just sort of the latest news a little bit. So that's PI.KL Studio.
No, dude, we appreciate it. I know it's a topic that most people don't want to talk about, but again, like we do a podcast on real people doing real stuff. This was the challenges we were having on Gaslight. You came and saved the day. So I felt like, hey man, we need to have you on because more people need to think about this early on. And I appreciate you jumping on here and talking about it. And it's really good, man. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and obviously excited for you guys for this project and all the other projects you guys are working on. And I just want to commend my team. It's not done in vacuum. My team is the one that really kind of pushed the envelope on that stuff.
That's for all of us, because none of us would be able to sit here without our teams, because none of us would be able to have time to sit down and talk on this podcast. So
exactly.
But
no, it was great. I appreciate it too.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys.
Thanks for tuning into the Real Estate Reserve podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.